are my fabulous fourth graders? Man, today's been a rainy day. I didn't get to read outside. I had to sneak back here in my favorite chair in my bedroom. I got my favorite blanket and I'm getting ready to read our new book. I had some big decisions to make today. I couldn't decide what book I wanted to read with you guys. So I ran up to school. I worked at school today with all the other fourth grade teachers and I grabbed some books off the shelf. This book though, I did not. This is a new book that I ordered from Amazon. It's called Out of My Mind. It came recommended off of a book list that I like to read and see what new books are out. What's cool about this book is there is a small piece, an excerpt of this book in our reading books at school. You know how we started off with the thinner, the smaller reading book, and then there's the thicker. A part of this book is in that thicker book. So I encourage you to read a part of that, and hopefully this might be a book that you might want to check out sometime soon. Okay, I'm not done reading it yet, but it's going really good. I really like it. Another book that I was considering was Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing by Judy Blume. This book's been around a long time. It's one of my favorites that I like to read. Another one that I was debating on reading, it's a book that I have not read. It's called The Lemonade War. It was recommended to me by a friend, a teacher friend of mine, but I haven't read it yet, but she said it was really good. I'm going to put this on my list of books to read this summer, okay? Another one, I know you're not surprised. I love dog books. Shiloh is one of my absolute favorites. I thought about reading it, but I thought, you know, every book I seem to read has something to do with mostly dogs or animals, so I thought I need to switch it up a little bit and do something different. But if you haven't read Shiloh, it's one of my all-time faves. The book that I did choose is a Louis Sachar book. Some of you may be familiar with him. He wrote the book Holes, and he also wrote another book that's very popular, an old book, but it's called Sideways Stories from Wayside School. That's another book that he wrote. But the book that I chose by Louis Sachar that I love to read, that I've been reading since I started teaching, is There's a Boy in the Girls' Bathroom. It's a pretty funny story about a boy in school. On the cover it says he may be the weirdest kid in school, but he's not completely hopeless. And you're going to meet him in a minute, the main character of this book, in just a minute when I get started. This book's been around for a while. The copyright date is 1987, so it's been around for a while. And it's also dedicated to Carla. That is the dedication page. The author also gives a little bit of background information, just a little bit of a prologue at the beginning that I'm going to read to you before we get started on chapter 1. Okay? He sat at his desk, last seat, last row, and looked at the chart on the wall next to him. Of course, there was no gold star next to his name. He had already done 3 things wrong. First, he had knocked over a girl and made her cry. Second, he was late getting back to class. And third, and worst of all, his name was Bradley Chalkers. As long as his name was Bradley Chalkers, he'd never get a gold star. They don't give gold stars to monsters. Chapter 1, There's a Boy in the Girls' Bathroom. Bradley Chalkers sat at his desk in the back of the room, last seat, last row. No one sat at the desk next to him or at the one in front of him. He was an island. If he could have, he would have sat in the closet. Then he could shut the door so he wouldn't have to listen to Mrs. Ebel. He didn't think she'd mind. She'd probably like it better that way too. So would the rest of the class. All in all, he thought everyone would be much happier if he sat in the closet, but unfortunately, his desk didn't fit. Class, said Mrs. Ebel, I would like you all to meet Jeff Fishkin. Jeff has just moved here from Washington, D.C., which, as you know, is our nation's capital. Bradley looked up at the new kid who was standing at the front of the room next to Mrs. Ebel. "Why don't you tell the class a little bit about yourself, Jeff?" urged Mrs. Ebel. The new kid shrugged. "There's no reason to be shy," said Mrs. Ebel. The new kid mumbled something, but Bradley couldn't hear what it was. "Have you ever been to the White House, Jeff?" Mrs. Ebel asked. "I'm sure the class would be very interested to hear about that." "No, I've never been there," the new kid said very quickly as he shook his head. Mrs. Ebel smiled at him. "Well, I guess we'd better find you a place to sit." She looked around the room. I don't see any place except, I suppose you can sit there at the back." "No, not next to Bradley," a girl in the front row exclaimed. "At least it's better than in front of Bradley," said the boy next to her. Mrs. Ebel frowned. She turned to Jeff. "I'm sorry, but there are no other empty desks." I don't mind where I sit," Jeff mumbled. "Well, nobody likes sitting there," said Mrs. Ebel. "That's right," Bradley spoke up. "Nobody likes sitting next to me." He smiled a strange smile. He stretched his mouth so wide it was hard to tell whether it was a smile or a frown. He stared at Jeff with bulging eyes as Jeff awkwardly sat down next to him. Jeff smiled back at him, so he looked away. As Mrs. Ebel began the lesson, Bradley took out a pencil and a piece of paper and scribbled. He scribbled most of the morning, sometimes on the paper and sometimes on his desk. Sometimes he scribbled so hard his pencil point broke. Every time that happened, he laughed. Then he taped the broken point to one of the gobs of junk in his desk, sharpen his pencil, and scribble again. His desk was full of little wads of torn paper, pencil points, chewed erasers, and other unrecognizable stuff, all taped together. Mrs. Ebel handed back a language test. "Most of you did very well," she said. I was very pleased. There were 14 A's and the rest B's. Of course, there was one F, but she shrugged her shoulders. Bradley held his test up for everyone to see and smiled that same distorted smile. As Mrs. Ebel went over the correct answers with the class, Bradley took out a pair of scissors and very carefully cut his test paper into tiny little squares. When the bell rang for recess, he put on his red jacket and walked outside alone. Hey, Bradley, wait up!" somebody called after him. Startled, he turned around. Jeff, the new kid, hurried alongside him. "Hi," said Jeff. Bradley stared at him in amazement. Jeff smiled. I don't mind sitting next to you," he said. "Really." Bradley didn't know what to say. I have been to the White House," Jeff admitted. "And if you want, I'll tell you about it." Bradley thought a moment, and then he said, "Give me $1 or I'll spit on you." Chapter 2. There are some kids, you can tell just by looking at them, who are good spitters. That is probably the best way to describe Bradley Chalkers. He looked like a good spitter. He was the oldest and the toughest looking kid in Mrs. Ebel's class. He was a year older than the other kids. That was because he had taken the 4th grade twice. Now he was in 5th grade for the first, but probably not the last time. Jeff stared at him, then gave him $1 and ran away. Bradley laughed to himself, and then he watched all the other kids have fun. When he returned to class after recess, he was surprised Mrs. Ebel didn't say anything to him. He figured that Jeff would probably tell on him and that he'd have to give the $1 back. He sat at his desk in the back of the room, last seat, last row. He's afraid to tell on me, he decided. He knows if he tells on me, I'll punch his face in. He laughed to himself. He ate lunch alone, too. As he walked in from lunch, Mrs. Ebel called him to her desk. Who, me? He asked. He glared at Jeff, who was already sitting down. I didn't do anything. Did you give my note to your mother? Asked Mrs. Ebel. Huh? What note? You never gave me a note. Mrs. Ebel sighed. Yes, I did, Bradley. In fact, I gave you 2 notes because you said the first one was stolen. Oh, yeah, that's right, he said. I gave it to her a long time ago. Mrs. Ebel eyed him suspiciously. Now, Bradley, I think it's very important for your mother to come tomorrow. Tomorrow was parents' conference day. She can't come, said Bradley. She's sick. You never gave her the note, did you? Call her doctor if you don't believe me. The school has just hired a new counselor, said Mrs. Ebel, and I think it's very important that your mother meet her. Oh, they already met, said Bradley. They go bowling together. I'm trying to help you, Bradley. Call the bowling alley if you don't believe me. Okay, Bradley, said Mrs. Ebel, and she let the matter drop. Bradley returned to his seat, glad that was over. He glanced at Jeff, surprised Jeff hadn't told on him. As he scribbled, he kept thinking about what Jeff had said to him. Hey, Bradley, wait up. Hi, I don't mind sitting next to you, really. I have been to the White House. If you want, I'll tell you about it. It confused him. He understood it when the other kids were mean to him. It didn't bother him. He simply hated them. As long as he hated them, it didn't matter what they thought of him. That was why he had threatened to spit on Jeff. He had to hate Jeff before Jeff hated him. But now he was confused. Hey, Bradley, wait up. Hi, I don't mind sitting next to you, really. The words rolled around in his head and banged against his brain. After school, he followed Jeff out the door. Hey, Jeff, he called, wait up. Jeff turned and then started to run. But Bradley was faster. He caught up to Jeff at the corner of the school building. I don't have any more money, Jeff said nervously. I'll give you $1 if you'll be my friend, said Bradley. He held out the $1 that Jeff had given him earlier. Jeff slowly reached out and grabbed it. Bradley smiled his same twisted smile. Have you ever been to the White House? He asked. Yes, said Jeff. Me too, said Bradley. He turned and ran home. All right, guys, that ends chapter 2. We'll start chapter 3 tomorrow. I hope you're enjoying the book. Be thinking as I'm reading, what point of view is this written in? Would you say first person or would you say third person? I want you to be thinking about that as I'm reading. And I hope that you guys are having a good week. And I hope that sometime soon, I heard that Mrs. Pearson did a Zoom meeting with you guys today. And I hope I can sneak in on one of those and get to see you guys and say hi. So anyway, I hope that you guys are doing well, and I hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye, guys.